Open for radio. What community sounds like. Stay open.
Searching history for buried classics. This is Lost Treasures of Gaming.
Welcome back to another episode of Lost Treasures of Gaming. I am one of your hosts, Sean Evans, otherwise known online everywhere as Zion Tane.
And I'm your other host, Sid Bolton, also known as Dirk the Daring, and of course I'm also your gaming archaeologist on the OMG Hour.
And what game are we mostly going to talk about today, Sid?
Well, it's a buried classic, of course, a lost treasure these days called Earthworm Jim, and I know you played this in your younger days.
Oh, yes. And it's funny, I can't remember if I played this on the Sega Genesis or on the Super NES, because I had both, but I don't know which system I actually played it on, but I loved Earthworm Jim.
Yeah, I definitely played it on the Genesis myself, and of course there was also the Sega CD version and whatnot, and I remember it for the great character animations, the wonderful music, and of course the really fun gameplay.
Well, it was just so wild and wacky. I think that's what was so fun about it, was that Earthworm Jim was just kind of no holds barred funny. You know,
yes.
Every character in it was just ridiculous. You know, and that's what made it so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. You can tell that the developers were having a lot of fun making that game, and we'll get to talk to someone very much involved in the game.
Yes, of course, our guest this week is David Perry, who is a pioneer in the gaming industry. And if you don't think you've heard of David Perry, you have, because David Perry was the founder of Shiny Entertainment, of course, who created Earthworm Jim. He is also the co-founder of Gaikai, which you all know as PlayStation Now. So you've definitely heard of David Perry. He's been in the industry for 33 years.
Yeah, and even if you haven't used the PlayStation Now, if you've used the technology where you can play your PlayStation 4 on your Vita, that's all part of Gaikai, and some amazing technology, and he's been in literally over 100 games he's had involvement with over the years.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So we're going to speak to him today and learn a little bit about his history in the gaming industry and some interesting tidbits about Earthworm Jim and beyond. So without further ado, here is David Perry. David, thank you so much for joining Lost Treasures of Gaming. You know, it is such an honor to have you on this show.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, just before we started, you said you were outside by the ocean, and we're all jealous now.
Basically this is why I live here. I grew up in Northern Ireland, and there's icebergs off the coast kind of thing. It's freezing up there. I mean, I remember as a kid actually going in the ocean. It was the craziest thing. I wouldn't even consider it these days. But then I moved to England, and that was better, but then I got an opportunity to live in California, and I didn't realize just how amazing, like when you get down by the beaches here. I mean, it's a sunny day today. I'm wearing a T-shirt.
Wow.
Wow. And yet, if you want to go skiing, the mountains are right beside us, and people are skiing. I could get there in like an hour. So that's
crazy.
Pretty cool.
Well, it's definitely cold up here right now.
Well, there's an ocean in Northern Ireland. It's just a lot colder.
It's a lot colder. That's right. So, David, you have actually been, before we actually get into the game we want to talk to you today about being Earthworm Jim, you've actually been in the gaming industry a long time. Why don't we talk about, like, what got you into gaming in the first place? And is it true that you were actually writing computer programming books at the age of 15?
Yeah, so at school, my school got some computers, and somebody at some point sat me down and explained, this is a computer, you can type in what is your name, and then it can say hello David. And I was like, well, that's not very fun. What can I do that's fun? And graphics in those days were black and white, and you would literally play the letter A or the letter V or something like that. You'd shoot these little dots across the screen. So the goal is, based upon this incredibly simple, hardware, what could you do that would be fun? And that became an exercise upon itself. And I ended up making these really basic games, like these are zombies that are the letter Z, and you've got to get them to fall in a hole or something.
Yeah.
But what I would do is I would send those games to magazines, and the magazines would print them. So that's what got me started. It was kind of cool to be a kid in a magazine, when I was young, and I would show my friends, and I was very proud of the fact that I was actually in print. But what I didn't know was they were actually paying me for this. So one day a check showed up. I think it was about $900.
Wow.
And I didn't have a bank account. I'm like, what do you do with this? This is fantastic. You can make money. And so literally I was like, I'm going to be up all night. And I started typing. And the publisher of the magazine, that was back in those days, that was called the National ZX 80 and 81 Users Club magazine or something like that. And the guy wrote to me and he said, look, I'm making books. Would you like to have a chapter in the book? Because you seem to be making quite a lot of games. So I said, sure. And then he called me back after that and said, would you like to have your own book? And I said, sure.
Wow.
And then I got to the point where the games I was writing were just, frankly, too long to put in a book. Because in those days, you had to type the whole thing in. And now it's a nightmare to type the whole game in with no mistakes. And because they kept getting longer and longer, I finally wrote one game that was just too much, I think, for a normal human to be bothered typing in. So that's when I finally sent it to a game publisher, and that was the end of the book life for me. I was just, from that day forward, we went to cassette tape.
Yeah.
And
then where did you go after that? Like, how did you get right into the gaming industry doing actual games then? Where did you start?
So I was in Northern Ireland, and there was no games business there at all. And so when I got this one game, it was called Drac Maze. It was written in BASIC, but it was a big, long listing. And I sent it to a company in England. And they looked at it and they went, we need programmers. Would you be willing to move to England? And we're willing to pay you $5,000 a year. And all my teachers were like, this is the worst decision you could ever make. Don't do it. And I said, actually, this is the best thing ever, so I'm leaving. And so some of my teachers were cool. Like my biology teacher said, I will give you a passing grade in biology as long as you never enter the field of biology.
Oh, wow.
And other teachers were just like, you're insane. This is like saying you're going to be a professional skateboarder. It seemed like a fad at the time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was something that just didn't really exist, so it wasn't in their life, so it didn't really mean anything. But boy, was I lucky, because I hopped onto this train that's never stopped, right? I mean, if anything, it's just enormous now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then, eventually you started your own company. After being told this is the worst decision you can ever make, you went and founded Shiny Entertainment in 1993. Yeah,
well, actually, what I did before that, I took it's a long story, but I was in a company called Microgen in the UK, making games in the UK, and that was going fine. And then I decided to go it alone, and I'm going to start my own company. So I got a little fancy at the time and a little ahead of myself. And I started a company, and that suddenly changed me into depending on other people. So, I had other programmers doing other versions, because I used to do everything myself, right? In the very beginning, you did everything. The graphics, the audio, the programming, the design, you did everything. Contracts, all done badly, but that's just how it was done. So, then that changed, and I suddenly I would go to a publisher and say I'm going to deliver this on multiple formats, and that made me responsible for delivering work for multiple people, and that became not as fun. So I kind of had this, that sounds like a great idea, but then I backed out of it once that game was done, because it wasn't any fun. And then I ended up I was doing just different games at the time for different publishers. and I hit upon the Terminator for Orion Pictures, and that was for Virgin, who were in the USA, and so they knew of me, and they said, we have an emergency over here. We've got a McDonald's game, and it must be done within 6 months, and we think you could get it done. Will you please just lock your front door and get on a plane and come to America? And so when I did that, I arrived, and we made a game called Global Gladiators on the Genesis, and that was really how I got over here, and sort of, but I wasn't having to start a company. I was able to just slip right into Virgin, and McDonald's hated our game, so I thought I was done.
Oh no!
So imagine these McDonald's executives showed up. This thing's terrible. Like, how can you buy burgers and fries in the game? And we were like, why would any kid want to do that? I mean, you want to buy fake burgers and fries? I don't understand. And they're like, where's Ronald McDonald? And we're like, well, we put him in there somewhere, but not really, because we really didn't want to. So anyway, they were so upset, and they actually ended up going and making another McDonald's game called McDonald Land. But we ended up winning Game of the Year from Sega. So we did very well with that, because that opened all kinds of doors for us with Sega directly. So Sega then came to us with another game, Cool Spot, and ultimately Disney's Aladdin. And
which was a fantastic game, by the way. I remember that game very fondly.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so what I thought was funny is McDonald Land came out, and the review said, you know, that you can buy burgers and fries, and they have Ronald Freitwig McDonald in it. But anyway, that was good because I survived, right? Because if that was the end of that, then that would have been the end of my whole, you know, career in the United States. So what happened was, after Aladdin, and Aladdin made an awful lot of money, I kind of went, you know, maybe it's time to start thinking about having my own company. So I got a job offer to leave Virgin to work at Sega Technical Institute, which was where Yuji Naka was working on Sonic the Hedgehog. And that would have been a technical director there, which would have been fun. But I also got offered a job with the guys who did the company Playmates, who make the toys for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And, you know, they'd made over $1 billion off their toys, and they wanted to get into video games. So the twist was that years ago I'd made a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. So I had this great calling card with them. And I just said to them, if you fund my company, I will give you the first 3 games.
Oh.
And then the twist to this was that the first thing we did was Earthworm Jim.
Yes.
So the relationship had a pretty great start, because they ended up making television and toys and everything else. Marvel did our comic books. I mean, we had like 30 different companies licensing it. So it was a very fun time, and a whole bunch of the people from Virgin ended up joining me. And we built that company together. And then there was a guy, Doug Tenaple, who wasn't a member of Virgin, but he ended up joining us as well, because he was just turned out to be sort of an ace in the hole for us. We had to give him a test. We said, please, you know, design a character. And because we were at the time considering making games like Knight Rider and things like that, which we weren't excited about, right? We're like, yeah, because we're with a toy company with lots of licenses. And so along comes Doug, and Doug, as his test to join our team, drew Earthworm Jim. And we're like, oh, we love this character. Let's make that. And because we had such a quirky team, you could just feel that from the game. The game was we had so much fun making it day to day. There was no design documents to speak of. It was all just made on the fly.
Really?
We were having fun on a certain level. Like, hey, this is fun. Let's ride a hamster. You know what I mean? And it was just, it's tough for me, because I understand the business side of the video game industry, and I understand why everything needs to be designed out ahead of time, but it doesn't allow for, are you having fun? And
right.
I've actually been in focus tests with modern producers, having to listen to people going, it's just not fun. and they can't do anything about it. They're just on a deadline, and the money is so expensive, and they just have to get it out the door, and it's painful to watch. So I yearn for those days back when we were able to just kind of have fun and make a game and put it out there. And it's kind of fun seeing mobile come around because it's starting to allow the smaller indie guys to do that again.
Yeah, for
just
sure.
Sort of dream something up and then deliver it.
Would you say from the 16-bit era was Earthworm Jim your favorite of those games? I mean, obviously there's a number, you've already mentioned a number of them, including Aladdin. Was that your favorite, or from the ones that you programmed or that you worked on more directly, what would you say is your favorite from that time period?
Well, the last game I personally programmed was Earthworm Jim, so that was my favorite because after that I went to the dark side of the force and ended up managing and sitting in contracts and licensing meetings.
Oh, man.
And just let's put it this way: you make a game, people, you usually end up with some fans from your game. When you make spreadsheets or PowerPoints, nobody cares.
Right.
Doesn't matter how great that spreadsheet is, nobody cares. You're never going to get anyone calling you up, and say, "Can I interview you about that amazing spreadsheet you did once?" That doesn't happen. So it's kind of fun. Management was for me, it was more a piece of learning more about the business. So I've tried to wear every possible hat in the games business so that I understand it from every possible angle. I've sat in the sales rooms with Walmart buyers and GameStop buyers, and I've done the licensing deals, and I've filed patents, and I've built technology and built engines, and I find the whole industry so fascinating. There's always something new to learn, right? And that to me is I like to be able to sit in a room with people and understand how they do what they do. And in certain cases, I think some of them don't really get the appreciation they deserve for because some of the stuff they do is really very hard, very, very hard. And so I love to be able to sit in a room and appreciate that and understand that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Now, I love how you're saying that Earthworm Jim had no design document. You just created the game because it was fun. Now, you were also saying that, who was it that wanted you to create a game so they could create more toys?
It was Playmates Toys.
Playmates Toys?
So Playmates Toys makes like the Disney toys and things like that.
Right.
You'll find them online if you look at the history of toys they've done. It's just incredible. But they created something called Playmates Interactive. And that was their goal, was to get in the game space. And what happened was the first game they got was Earthworm Jim. So they thought, wow, we love this video game space. We're going to make tons of games. And so they started making lots of games, but they chose all kinds of other developers, and some of those games just never even showed up. And so the whole Playmates Interactive didn't go so well in the long run for them. And it was an interesting time because our relationship with them was a beautiful fit, because we were making games, but we were also able to go into the other areas like television. And one thing that most people don't know is I actually managed to get a deal to do a TV show for MDK as well. MDK was a game that we made. It was the first game with sniper mode, and that game was it had a potential to have a computer graphic TV show. So I went to a company called Mainframe in Canada who did Reboot, which was the first CG TV show.
It was.
And they agreed to do it, and Playmates agreed to do it, and everyone was shaking hands. And then, but I had made one fatal flaw in this plan, which I'd sold my company to Interplay, and Interplay decided, no, I don't think we're going to make that TV show.
Oh, no.
And so I'm like, what? Everyone's standing in the room. The guy's got the check in his hand. What is going on? And anyway, they said no. So that was the end of it. That basically, I killed that TV show stone dead. But net, it was a fun time because, the games industry, I think, opens so many doors in Hollywood and with television companies. So, years ago I got to work on the Matrix games, and these are the kind of things that the games that we were making, like the MDKs, people like the Wachowski brothers would play them as gamers, and then they would go, okay, we need a game maker, and we want to work with that team. And so the games open doors, and so it's hard to really work out what was the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do in certain games. The only thing I'm absolutely certain of is I shouldn't make any more games with babies in them, because I've done that twice, and both of those. Like asking, because most of our audience was male at the time, asking them to play as babies was not a good move. I think I finally got that clear.
Nice.
Now, how surprised were you, though, at the success of Earthworm Jim? Like, it sold over 1 million copies? And then, of course, all the toys that were probably quite popular at the time as well.
Yeah, well, it was a really good thing for us because no one had heard of Shiny. We were this new startup. And what I did was I made boxes with tons of magazine covers. So all the press were being really nice to us and giving us coverage, and we got a lot of covers. And so I would put a whole slew of magazine covers in a box, and we put a hand-painted cell of Earthworm Jim, and the hand-painted cell had a nice stamp on it that said, like limited edition, special edition, hand-painted Earthworm Jim cell or something like that on it. And I remember I got a letter back from Howard Lincoln, who is the head of Nintendo, and he said, I just hung this over my son's bed. And I was like, what? And then I got one from Activision. It was like I was on the wall outside of Bobby Kotick's office. And basically it opened a lot of doors for us. And there was a little bit of guerrilla marketing going on in there as well in the background. But it put us on the map really fast. Like, it didn't take long at all before people knew of our company.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember Earthworm Jim very fondly. Now, you developed that. Was it originally developed for Sega Genesis and then Super NES, or both at the same time?
Well, actually, I had a friend, Nick Jones, who I'd worked with back in England, and Nick was our SNES programmer, and he was in the office next to me. So, yes, I think officially we would say the Genesis was the lead, and so he was constantly trying to make sure that he didn't fall behind. He was always like right there. So, we'd check in some code or graphics, and he would immediately get that up and running on the SNES. So we treated the formats both as very important. But it was just an interesting time because those were the two machines you really had to cover.
Oh, yeah,
so
for sure.
We took them both very seriously.
Yeah,
now,
it was a
question
fantastic
for you.
game. Sorry,
it was
go ahead,
definitely a
Sid.
fantastic game, but I want to ask you about some of your industry stuff. And of course, you've written a great book on game design, which I personally have, and I would encourage anyone who's thinking about that to look for your book on Amazon or wherever. But do you still or do you allow people still to do the David Perry challenge? I'll explain it for those that don't know what it is. But before I say too much about it, I just want to know if you still allow people to do that with you or not.
I do still do it, and I have given multiple letters now to people that are seeking jobs in the games business, and the fact that it's so hard makes those letters, I think, very meaningful.
Right. So do you want to maybe explain in your words what it is so that people that have never heard of what the DP challenge is and why it's so hard?
Well, what happened was I was watching people interview other people. So you'd get someone interviewing somebody for a job to be a designer, and I'd be like, dude, the guy that's getting interviewed knows games way better than the guy interviewing him. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. He knows his games inside out. And that's a hard person to interview. So it kind of left me going, wow, how many people are actually paying attention to the games that are out there? And that seems a bit crazy. So I gave a speech once at GDC, and I just said to the audience, who here has played Pokemon? Right? Very simple question. And shockingly, not everyone's hands went up, right? A lot of people hadn't played it. And I kind of went, well, wait a minute, that's like, Avatar the movie came out and you didn't watch it, but you're in Hollywood and you have a job in movies.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's not optional, it's required. You have to look at these games. Even if you don't like Pokemon, you have to load it up and look at it and see why people are in love with it. And it's just required. It's not an option. So that was the concept was, well, if you were to take the top-selling games of all time, how many of those have you played? And then you go, well, wait a minute, I don't want you to play them. I want you to actually really pay attention and look at them. And so if you're going to pay attention and look at them, then you should be sort of noticing what's working, why you're laughing, or why you're enjoying it, or why you're frustrated right now, or why you're confused right now. And so the idea was simply to take each game and to force you to stop just playing it, but also look at it and think about it, and then write down your thoughts. And there were some simple categories to help get those thoughts down. And it would usually take, I don't know, a page or two to get those thoughts down for a game, and then you just move on to the next game. And at the time, people would rent the games, or they would get them in the bargain bins, because a lot of the games were the best games in history, which means they're already down to like $5 or $3. So anyway, I put that out there saying if anyone can complete the top 100 games of all time, I will give you a letter for your resume, and that letter will say on it, that you've been given this ridiculously hard task. It's a very time-consuming thing, but it also shows that when you start something hard, you can get it done. And given the amount of people that start and the amount of people that finish, you're clearly someone who actually gets things finished. And now you're going to have a really good knowledge on game mechanics and all the rest of it. So, boom, people started sending me their notes, and it turned out the average notes were hundreds of pages. So it was like writing a full book. You just written the book on the top 100 games of all time. And that's a really, really healthy thing to do if you're going to be in the games business. And so the plan was, if you finished that, then you would do a second book, which would be for the highest rated games. So you did the best selling and then the highest rated. And that would, well, I actually don't mind. You could do them the other way around. But basically the goal is to try to force you to really look at all of that stuff, which means you're going to play some sports games that you hate. Yeah. Like maybe you're not into ice hockey. Tough, you're going to have to play some. And you're going to have an opinion on it. So it's something that's kind of continued with me for years. I still love online demos and things like that, because I love that people can get opinions on games, even if they don't, they have to commit to buying it, but they can check it out and have an opinion, and it makes them, socially quite valuable in conversations, because they're like, oh, do you remember this? Do you remember that? You guys are good examples because you know your games, right? So that I think it's valuable, and I think in recruiting people with answers, well, I've seen this solved 5 different ways, is actually kind of useful.
Yeah, well, it's something that I've looked at, and since I basically have all the games, so maybe I should do it. I don't have to worry about renting them now. So
yeah, Sid just goes to his basement to find them.
Yeah, I've got over 15,000 games now, so I think
that's awesome.
I'm covered, including, of course, all of your wonderful releases over the years, and you've been involved with, I think. Did I read something like 100 games that you've been involved with over the years? That's amazing.
Yeah, it sounds about right. Yeah, and it's funny because like Wikipedia is not correct, and I think it's funny when you read articles that you're in, you realize the press makes mistakes all the time.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, and you're like, when I read the press, I assume everything is completely correct. When I read Wikipedia, I use it all the time, just assuming everything's correct, and then you see your own stuff, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not correct.
Not correct.
It's pretty funny.
But you can go in and fix it at least if you want to. So there you go.
Exactly.
There you go.
So, David, before we let you go today, why don't we talk a little bit about Gaikai? You're a co-founder of Gaikai. How did that start?
Well, what happened was, again, because I'm Mr. Wear All Hats, something I got very interested in was the concept of free-to-play. I was thinking forward. I'm always trying to think forward. What's going to happen to us next? And I was interested in when the game industry isn't selling physical media anymore and it's completely digital, how's that going to work? And at the time, China was far ahead of us because they had so much piracy, they kind of just moved straight into digital, and South Korea as well. So I went to South Korea, China, and I went nice and early, which means that the companies there were incredibly open and, welcoming and very, very open with their information, and sort of explained what was working and what wasn't working, and it really caused me to come back to the U.S. going, man, I've just learned so much from these people, and one of the things with free to play is this idea of it becomes like a mathematical problem to you as a game developer. Is the more people you can get to try your game, the more only a certain percentage of them are going to buy anything. So, let's say 5% are going to buy. Okay, well, I need to stick another 100 people in my funnel so I can get 5 more people to buy. And so it becomes this business of how do you get lots of people to play your games? And so after lots of head scratching, the answer at the time was not clear because investors thought that Zynga was actually where the game industry was going. If you weren't Zynga, you sucked. You'd sit with investors. Okay, let me hear your Flash game plan. And we'd be like, well, we're not planning to do that. Then they would be like, we're not funding it. Nothing to do with it.
Yep.
Oh, my God, the future is Zynga. That's where it's all happening. So you got to make Flash games on Facebook. And so that was tough. I mean, it was a tough thing. So we literally started to develop a cloud engine in Flash so that you could play games which were actually running in the cloud that would deliver the experience straight into Flash. And we got that engine up and running. And I was with Acclaim at the time, and Acclaim ended up getting acquired by Playdom, and then Playdom was bought by Disney. But that technology was, if you think about it, it was the wrong answer, but it was the right question, which was how can we make games more accessible? And I think that's one of the things that people are missing is Netflix and Spotify and all of that kind of stuff is putting entertainment like movies and television right at our fingertips everywhere we go, but we just can't do that with video games.
Right.
I just can't. I mean, even FIFA Soccer on an iPhone takes too long to download, right? If I've been there, I've sat in the house and said, oh, we're bored, you're bored, I'm bored, let's play some soccer. Okay, you download it, I've already got it, and then we're just sitting there looking at each other going, this is painful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I give a speech at DICE in Las Vegas about this idea of, how are we going to do this, and how are we going to do it properly so that the whole game's like I don't know, 20 gigabyte game just loads instantly and plays from the cloud. And I was really talking about it as a theory. I wasn't talking about it as this is something I'm actually going to do. But then some people from the Netherlands contacted me, and they ended up becoming my co-founders because they had been actually working on the tech. So long story short, we built Gaikai together, and they moved to the U.S., and we proved that it was possible. The thing that you're probably not aware, and most people are not aware, is what we actually did is we found a way to get rid of the latency. And I loved it because there's so many people online. This is a terrible idea because of latency. It turns out you can solve latency, and we found a way to do it. And we did a demonstration with a game called Bulletstorm from Epic.
Yep.
And that game, we ended up getting it running locally at the same speed as it's running. It's running from the cloud, but it seems like it's running locally because if you have another version beside it, it's the same. And we did that demonstration Digital Foundry did a review on it, and everyone was just like, this is impossible. This is actually impossible. But the twist of the story was that we also realized that televisions have more latency in their circuitry because the televisions don't care. They just don't care that you're watching television and time shifted by like 100 milliseconds. Who knows? You wouldn't know that.
Right.
But on a game, it matters. So we found that if we modified televisions to incorporate some ideas that we had, like if you designed a television, you know, not just the normal way, but listen to us, no big changes, but some specific optimizations, then we could make the Ethernet to a photon hitting your eye faster than HDMI. Now, how crazy would that have been if we had have completed that project?
Wow.
Because that means that the games running from the cloud would actually play faster and twitchier with unlimited compute power when compared to a game running through HDMI cables.
That's incredible.
That would have caused chaos in the games business, and we were bought just before that really started to show. And I think that was the trajectory we were on. We were also being built into lots of websites. We were on Walmart.com, BestBuy.com, and so we became this company that if you, as a game publisher, want to be on Walmart's website, the only way you could get there was through us, right? And we were then saying to the game publisher, the game press, you know, you were going to write an article about this game. Why don't you? Sorry, a helicopter's flying overhead. If you're going to write a review on this game, wouldn't you like to be able to offer the chance to play it right with your review? So when you write your review, you can talk about when you get to level 2. It's flying right over my head. So when you get to level 2, then you can play, you know, look out for this certain thing. So that idea that they're going to experience the game right away with your article was kind of neat for the press too. So Gaikai was nicely positioned to do that, to sort of grow this enormous audience because we were all of these different gaming sites combined. Then we also signed Facebook. So then you want to put a game in Facebook that will load instantly. You can do that with us. We put Crisis into Facebook.
Wow.
And if you looked at tweets from people at the time, they were like, what is this magic? Because the Crisis was running on a laptop that was completely incapable of running Crisis. And the answer is because it's not actually running, it's running in the cloud, right?
Right.
So that's what got me excited about it, and that's why we went marching off down that path. But Sony sort of went, this is tech that we would like to use. And it's been great because they've invested very heavily into it, and the net result is, you know, we've been able to build what I consider to be Gaikai 2.0, and really focus on the PlayStation platform. But I still think cloud gaming is massively misunderstood, and I think it will be. It's here to stay, and I think over time, as people realize the future potential as it's designed into hardware, it will fundamentally change your. You know, if you just want to casually check something out, I like that idea that you can just hit a button and it appears.
Yeah.
And you know, that goes back to even things like we were talking about the DP Challenge. Wouldn't it be nice if those games were all just available? And ultimately, that's how we're going to, as an industry, compete with Netflix and Spotify and things like that, is once we get to a point where, you know, there's a really, really nice library of games that are just immediately available everywhere.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. A friend of mine actually just bought a new TV, and PlayStation Now is in the TV. It's part of it.
Yeah.
Like he's
a good
just,
example.
Yeah.
So that was our actual. Well, if you looked at Gaikai pre going to Sony, that was our whole pitch: was everything, everywhere, instantly, and we believe so strongly in that because if you look at the game industry would actually become the number one form of entertainment if that gets delivered. If it's every game, everywhere, instantly, it's the math goes massively in our favor.
Oh yeah,
so,
it would be incredible.
But it doesn't exist today. And so that's why we were on this sort of steady course of trying to build it. And we had some pretty good deals. Like we did a deal with YouTube, so you could actually watch a video of a game and then click and then be in the game. And we did a demonstration of that with EA and FIFA, and it worked. So, you know, why wouldn't you do that? That's cool.
That's awesome.
Wow.
So it sounds like, even though Gaikai is now that you were bought by Sony, but it doesn't sound like you're limited to just Sony products. Then is that true?
Well, that's it. So Sony as a company has been, they're really forward-looking. I mean, you can tell that with their VR and everything else. They're just on it, and so for this technology, it was something that just fit. But Sony has to come first. I want to be clear on that. We're really focused on Sony's customers first. But at the end of the day, the power of the cloud is that it opens up the market, and
for sure.
And so you're seeing us do that now, and absolutely, why wouldn't you? If it's good for the gamers, if it's really like they're in their bed and their PlayStation somewhere else, but they want to play a game and they're already subscribed, go for it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's exciting.
So the more devices, the better, really.
Awesome. Excellent, David. Thank you so much. Sid, do you have anything else you want to ask before we let David go?
Well, we could talk to David all night, but I know we can't, so we'll let him go for now. But I'll keep him updated on my DB.
All right, that's what we'll do. Next time we'll get some hot chocolates and we'll stay up late and we'll help you with your design challenge.
Awesome.
We can play some games on PlayStation Now. There you go.
There you go. So, David, why don't you tell our listeners how they can find out more information about you, about Gaikai, and can they follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, so I have a blog which is dperry.com, so dperry.com, and everything, all the social links and stuff are on there. I don't get the time that I would love to really write big articles there, but I think probably the next project I'll do for the community will be to do a version 2 of my book. But this time around, I want the community to help do it because I want it to be a lighter version. It's like 1,000 pages long, which is just too much. But so we're going to do a light version. The book was based on the idea that game designers aren't sort of this special breed of person that has some weird DNA that nobody else has. I had a meeting once and I asked a room of people to invent a weapon for a video game that's never been seen before, and they all were stumped. I go, you get 2 minutes, go, and they're all like, it's hard. And then I just scrolled a list of all the possible ways someone can die, and it included everything, like being eaten from the inside out, just every possible way to die. And they just sat there for a minute just watching this list, and then I said, okay, I want a weapon that's never been in a video game before. You get 2 minutes, go, and everyone had ideas. And I went, So having something to leap from seems to unlock a lot of creativity in people. So that's what the idea of the book was. But I need to find a way to somehow lighten the load. It's just too much paper there. So there needs to be some more, maybe it's a digital book, like an online thing where it's like a database driven or something. But the idea was to try to get you from, like, I need to design an enemy or I need to make this scene funny. How do I make a scene funny? Well, here's how you do it. But try to give it to them in the most, the cleanest way possible. So that was the idea.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, David, thank you so much for being on Lost Treasures of Gaming. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
No problem. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, David.
Wait a minute. Before you turn off this podcast, I want to thank you for listening to The Lost Treasures of Gaming with Sean and Sid. Now, if you want to hear some of Sean's other shows that he hosts at OMG Nexus, you can check out the OMG Hour, Gamers Unscripted, and Primetime. Now, if you're in the mood for something a little different, then check out what we have over at Open Forum Radio, where we host such podcasts as Open Forum Radio, The 40cast, Geeks for the Win, I Recommend, Just Press Start, Tap the Craft, The Married Gamers, Gamer Husbands Radio, My Peanut Gallery, and many, many more. Hey, thank you again for listening to The Lost Treasures of Gaming. Open Forum Radio. What community sounds like. Stay open.
So, Sid, what I thought was going to be mostly a show about Earthworm Jim turned out to be a much more interesting journey through David Perry's gaming history.
Yeah, I mean, David's been an industry veteran now for over 30 years. I mean, not too many people can say that. I know we've had some guests on this show that have had a similar tenure in the business, but the one thing about DP, as his friends call him, is that the stuff he's gotten involved in has always been fun, like if he wasn't having fun doing something anymore, he got out of it. So, everything he's worked on has been fun for him. And, so it's pretty interesting, to hear him talk about all these different things and go back to the 16-bit era. I mean, obviously he started out in the 8-bit era, but I think he had most of his fun in terms of, game programming and design and whatnot, in the 16-bit days. And of course now, he's such an eye on the future with David, and I think he's really amazing in that he's been able to predict what was going to happen and what is become reality.
Well, there's two things that really stand out for me from our interview here is, first of all, Earthworm Jim had no design document. They built a game that they had fun playing, period.
Yeah.
That was it. If they weren't having fun, they redesigned it. And, that's just brilliant.
Yeah, such few restrictions, and partly because games were less of a financial gamble, and it had a little bit more mobility, which, as he was saying, is, the mobile industry has kind of brought some of that back, some of the indie teams, smaller teams, and give, the game people working on it a little bit more mobility within to actually, make the game a little more flexible. Whereas if you're making a AAA title, it's got to be planned out and it's got to work, this way, and that's the only way it's got to work, and everything has to come together. So there's definitely a big difference in how we make games.
Oh, for sure. And then the second thing that stood out for me was the fact that he's literally creating magic right now. He was saying that they actually have the ability to deliver a game through streaming faster than your HDMI could send it to your eye.
Yeah.
And it's that's just mind-blowing.
It is.
And to think, is that the future of gaming? And I believe it will be. I believe eventually even our consoles will no longer have discs. It'll all be delivered either streaming, kind of like in a Netflix kind of way, at least because it's going to be all digital. But if you could literally stream every game you own and you don't even need a hard drive,
yeah,
I honestly see that as the future of gaming.
Yeah, and it's, as a game collector, it scares me to think about games going away from a physical format, but I do understand, the benefits of it, and that most likely in the future that's the way things will be, which in a way is good for me because it means that there's going to be a finite cap on how many video games there are for me to actually physically collect. So that'll be good news for me in one sense, but definitely the convenience. I definitely see the benefits of the convenience and the ability to just sort of, whatever game you want to play now, you don't have to wait, and David is right on that. He's definitely, for sure though, ahead of his time, but having said that, he's also making that dream a reality with PlayStation Now and the technology that Sony is now delivering to our homes. So he had the vision. Sony has made it possible to come into all of our homes, and I'm just looking forward to what he comes up with next, or how he evolves this idea into reality in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful interview. We were so fortunate to have David on. So, David, if you're listening, we really appreciate you taking the time. It was an absolute honor having you on the show. We hope you, dear listeners, hope you enjoyed it as well. Of course, don't forget to check out GamingHistory101.com every Friday for a video of the game that we just featured. And if we're not featuring the show here every week, at least listen to the OMG Hour, where there is a lost treasure every week. You can follow this show on Twitter at LostTreasuresOG, and I am on Twitter and pretty much everywhere as Zion-Tane.
And if you're looking for me, you can find me at Sid Bolton. That's Sid with a Y. And if you want to send us an email, give us an idea for a guest for a show or a game that you want to have us explore a little bit in more detail, please send us an email to losttreasuresofgaming@gmail.com. And if you want to read the show notes for today's show, or you want to listen to any of our other podcasts or any of that kind of stuff, just find out a little bit more information, game reviews, you can go to the website, which is omgnexus.com.
Excellent. That is it for this episode of Lost Treasures of Gaming. If you want to get a hint of what might be coming next week, be sure to listen to the next episode of the OMG Hour. We'll talk to you again next time.
See you soon.
This has been an OMGNexus.com production.